Hey Art Wizards, Hajra here. I was going to do some swatching today so I could show some more of the colors that I've gotten in the Art Graf Taylor type sort of watercolor gouache tablets. So thanks for parking your brushes with me and let the epic art adventures begin. The Art Graf Taylor's chalk, and it's cut like Taylor's chalk, but it's actually another gouache tablet, and they do also have good light fastness. And once I found out from the company in Portugal personally that they have really good light fastness, I added to the yellow, blue, and red that I already had that I did the line decker lady in. So if you saw that or took that as a class, that those are the colors I used, and they turned out to be very good. So because they come in a Taylor's chalk type shape, you can actually just color them onto the paper like a crayon, like you do with the Cretacolor aqua bricks or sticks. Wet that up and it turns into gouache. So these colors are around the wheel are not extra colors that I bought. It's only a yellow, red, and blue that I had, but when you make the purples with that red, because it's a little bit towards the warm side, you get these duller purples, which are great for shadows in that piece that we did and a lot of other pieces. But if you want a really vibrant purple, you want a cooler red, like a magenta. So luckily they offered that as a separate solo color, so I bought that. And then I also bought the earth colors and a green, because also it doesn't come with a proper green. And you can mix a pretty vibrant green, but I think this is an even colder green that's more like phthalo. The green swatched first, and yeah, it looks very much like a phthalo. And also it's wetting just as fast and creamy as it was before, and it would be even thicker if I had, you know, done like a very thick application, but I'm doing it just for swatching. I tend not to make my swatches super opaque because you can't see the color identity as well. Ochre is a great earth color addition for skin and for Old Masters palettes, so I'm glad I got all the earth tones too. So this is sepia. The sanguine was the reddest one, the reddest brown, so sanguine actually also means like cheery and happy and rosy and ruddy, so it's going to be always the reddest of those colors typically. So this primary yellow is a higher chroma yellow. This ochre is a lower chroma or lower intensity, lower saturation yellow. And I'm going to put in the brown, dark brown. Got rid of the labels, so this might be the brown and that might be the sepia, but it doesn't matter that much to me for this set, and that's the black, and of course there's no confusion there, it's black. So that's my full set for the Art Graf, and like I said, I have the Cretacolor bricks as gouache. The other things that I use are the Cretacolor aqua sticks as a stick gouache, and this is all in the interest of not having a tube gouache. I was trying to do a little Easter ornament for my sister, and so instead of calling it Thumbelina, I called it Fatimalina. I have a little ornament that I'm eventually going to glue it on. Metallic acrylic ink on the back. I've glued a ribbon onto here, and I've also put a layer of watercolor ground or acrylic varnish here, not just to glue this on, but it seals the wood away from the paper. And that's important because the wood is not acid free, your paper and your painting is. So if you want it to last a long time, make sure you do a layer of some kind of ground or varnish. And I think what I'm going to do is do a yellow, green, and purple palette, because these are daffodils. It's a very Easter themed piece. Easter is coming up. I had the yellow and green and I wanted to add the purple to make it a complementary color scheme, or a split complementary or near complementary. So I've got a gouache palette here. Some of these colors are Art Graf and some of these colors are the Cretacolor aqua brick. Got the yellow up there. I've got this green. Okay, so I think I'm going to use the lighter green and the darker green and the yellow and skip that middle green. Okay, so I think I actually like the lighter purple for this piece. A little bit of patience can cool your soup and can also soften your gouache. A beautiful shadow rose peachish, you know, this is a good palette for the skin tone on her face. I do want to make it more opaque because my sister tends to like opaque painting and finished pieces that she hangs up at her house. They don't really, I don't think they're not big fans of watercolor. Not everybody likes every medium. It's an ink and wash piece, so I can't really get super complicated because it's a little cartoony piece. It's gonna make my ink lines fade a bit to do all of this opaque coloring in here. Sometimes a softer ink line is gonna make it look more delicate, so that's okay too. Sometimes Edmond Duloc's paintings look like they had a very softly rendered brown line in ink, and he didn't really do that in real life, but the printing at the time in the early 1900s made it look like that, and it made the paintings even more valued in the books as a result of that subtler ink line. And so I think that it depends on the look that you're looking for. I love the challenge and the brain growth that happens with challenging pieces, but I also like the comfort and catharsis of a simpler piece, and so you can get different kinds of, I think, meditation and relief from different kinds of painting. The simpler pieces are good for exploring colors and shapes and mediums, and then you can still get a lot of fun out of doing some simpler pieces, and then can do more extravagant pieces. And there, the meditation and getting into the zone and flow state is really about getting embedded in the challenge of the shapes and rendering, whether it's the chiaroscuro or whether it's the, and that's done usually through a grisaille or a rendition of some other value under painting and might kinds of paintings, and then doing it more complicated rendering. If you put the gouache in and put the damp line on top of both of them, it'll still give you a bit of that bleedy effect that you get with watercolor on wet and wet, because you're kind of doing the same thing with the gouache, but instead of it being the bare white of the paper, it's the wet white paint. So that can definitely go in, but it's not going to be as layerable, of course, as watercolor, because watercolor is so much more layerable. We're doing a lot of master studies and a lot more complicated ones in person, 4-hour-long classes at the Santa Cruz Art League. If you want to sign up for any of those, and there are wonderful discounts available for members, and also if you're a senior or if you're signing up for more than one class. So I hope to see some of you guys in those classes, because you really can't replace digital with in-person stuff, although digital is very convenient, and I'll always like it for those reasons, because you can watch from the comfort and convenience of your own home. But the in-person experience of being able to interact with your teacher, students, have snacks, hang out, and do all that stuff is also very nice. All these Easter and spring colors, it can be quite bright. Spring really does have the loudest colors, spring and summer. My favorite color palettes are actually autumn and winter. The yellow, we've got a yellow and a purple in the skin tone, and even though this is a very simple piece, you can use a purple part for the shadows and the yellow part for the mid-tone and half-tone area, just barely slightly implied, because it's a very high-key piece. You don't have to go much darker than that. But one thing about gouache is that if you leave it alone and let it dry, sometimes it'll show you what else it wants, versus keep working on it when it's wet. It's really hard for you to figure out, because it's going to dry a little bit differently anyway. Sort of went back and added some shadows into that yellow to make it a little bit less high chroma and strident, and just using a little bit more of the purple. And very loosely, just very loose implication. Did the same thing for the chick and the chick's shadows, and also went back and added some white spots at the center of the green centers and the flowers on the dress with just a white paint pen. So add a little bit more shadow behind this chick's head so that it can pop out against this yellow dress. Now there's lots of ways to more subtly paint these leaves, and I'm not going to, but you really could if you wanted to have a lot more subtle shading in them. It isn't particularly challenging. If you want to do your own version of it, that would be very cute. Like I said, it's based off of a vintage Easter piece that I saw that had a little chick down there instead of a duck. I just changed it to a duck, and I changed the little girl to look more like my older sister. So once I'd finished up this piece, I actually didn't like that it was still a little bit too bright for me. I didn't really quite like the mood of it. So what I ended up doing was going back and taking that green and red violet and mixing a purpley brown and using that as a magical little foil for the background, and it really helps ground the piece and lets the focal point of the face really sort of shine a bit more. For that, I sprayed a fixative on it. I used Final Fix from Spectre Fix, and then I cut it out, glued it onto the wood blank ornament, dremeled off the edges so the paper fit perfectly, and that's basically just electric sanding. And then after that, I put a varnish on top. I was out of natural glass by Spectre Fix, so instead I used leftover Tri-Art liquid glass, and that gives it a really nice glossy feel. And it was a really fun project to do over Easter weekend for my sister. As always, wizards, thanks for parking your brushes with me, and until next time, wishing you all epic art adventures.